This is Regained Wellness Podcast with Jamie Logie, episode 87, Kombucha Health Benefits.
I'm going to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. George can't hit what his hands can't see. Now you see me, now you don't. He think he will, but I know he won't. They tell me George is good, but I'm twice as nice. And I'm going to stick to his butt like white on rice.
Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jamie Logie, I run regainedwellness.com, and this is the Regained Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And starting off the show with the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. Today is, what's today? Early Monday, so this just happened, when did he pass? Saturday night, I think it was. Yeah, so I mean, there's not a lot more you can say about someone that legendary, in and out of the ring. And everything like that. So I was a huge boxing fan growing up. I remember Ali kind of at the later stage of his career. I was born in the late 70s, so I caught him in kind of that, twilight phase as he was sort of tapering out and just doing other, ways to promote himself. And he was involved in all sorts of things like charity events, or he'd be at wrestling, WrestleMania, and everything. So, familiar with him, didn't see him in his prime, obviously, but we've all been exposed to his greatness. So pretty amazing. And interesting, kind of a warrior right to the end. You hear his story from his daughter, just saying when he passed away, essentially everything had all his organs had shut down, brain activity, clinically basically dead, but his heart kept beating for almost another half hour past all that complete shutdown. So, a warrior right through to the end. So sad, but, amazing to have these kind of icons in our time that touched a lot of people. So moving into the topic today, it's hard to go from Muhammad Ali to kombucha, but that's what we're talking about today. One of the best sources of probiotics, one of the, potentially one of the healthiest drinks you can have. Just going to talk about, if you're not sure what it is, I'll fill you in on all that today, why it's beneficial, what you should look for, what makes it, everything like that. So just get you up to speed. If you've been drinking it already, you're probably familiar with, some of the like amazing health benefits that come from it, from, probiotic content and whatnot. So we'll break it all down. So I want to give a shout out here first to Mike and Laura, who are listening in New Zealand. Mike got a hold of me through email and just, thanking me for the show. So really appreciate these guys listening. They're probably listening, I think, having dinner right now. So hope that's going good. Mike actually runs his own podcast as well, if you want to check that out. And he's over at the blindsportpodcast.com. So definitely go check that out. And also New Zealand. If you haven't been in New Zealand, check out New Zealand at some point in your life. Probably the most amazing country on earth. I lived in Auckland for a little while. When was that? 2009 or 10? I can't remember exactly. And then spent, months just traveling up and down the country, the North Island, the South Island, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you'll understand once you see it, just from everything from, the Tongariro passing, like up where they filmed Lord of the Rings, to Milford Sounds, to Queen, like everything. It's just probably the most spectacular country in the world, and definitely go see it at some point. Okay, so we've covered a lot, but we'll get to kombucha right now. Okay, kombucha. So you might have seen this kind of popping up everywhere, this drink. And again, if you're not too sure what it is, it's becoming, an ancient beverage that's now really becoming a commercially produced product, and it's showing up in grocery stores, health shops all over the place. It's not just kind of a underground type drink anymore. People, as I think we're becoming more health conscious as a society and culture, and as we're making a lot of these big health changes, you're starting to see things like this more available. And people know what chia seeds are now, or cacao nibs, and people who are gluten free, and just people are on the lookout for a little more health beneficial type products, and kombucha would be one of those. So, what is it? Do you need it to be healthy? What are all the health benefits? essentially kombucha is usually found in tea form and combined with sugar, bacteria, and yeast, but it's not technically a tea. It's the kombucha itself. When we talk about kombucha, that's actually the bacteria colony that really provides all those health benefits. What happens is then that kombucha is brewed with green or black tea, and that helps create the fermentation effect. So if you've had it before, or if you haven't had it, it's lightly carbonated. So in its kind of pure raw form, it tastes a little bit like a sparkling apple cider. That's kind of how I always found it. I mean, almost like a touch like champagne, but without the horrendous hangovers and trying to pop bottles and pretend you're a baller every night in the club. But kombucha you can sip quietly at home without ending up dancing on a bar or tabletop. So what they're doing now with a lot of the commercial varieties are you can find it in its original flavor, if you want to call it like that, but a lot of the commercial versions are mixing it with different ingredients and juices to create fruitier versions, and some of them are going with root extracts or ginger, which is probably my favorite. There's ones that they'll mix in kind of a green space to it, like you'll have some spirulina. It almost tastes like a kind of a peppermint type drink, and then everything from peach, mango, blueberry. There's a ton out there right now. So looking back, kind of the history of kombucha here, it's generally assumed that it originated in the Far East, possibly China, but it's kind of a little hazy on the details of it. But it looks like it's been consumed for a good 2,000 years or so either way. So the first recorded use of kombucha comes from China in around 221 BC during the Qin dynasty, where they called it the tea of immortality. So as as trade routes began to open up in the East, that's where it helped to spread kombucha to places like India and Russia through traders and travelers and everyone like that. So from wherever it originated, it makes its way into Japan between the wars, after a Japanese visitor to a place called, I believe it's Kargasok in Russia, found that they were drinking fermented tea that was providing them astonishing health benefits as well as longevity and an overall, better sense of well-being. So there's also the idea that kombucha was introduced into Japan by a Korean physician named Kombu around 415 AD. So you can look this up. There's varying stories on its origins and whatnot. But in either case, at some point, it was introduced to Japan, where that really, where in Japan it really developed and shared its use, and then really led to its spread around the world, especially during the Second World War, as the popularity of kombucha grew across Europe, because there was a bit of a tea shortage and even a sugar shortage at that time. So kombucha started to make the rounds in that way. So kombucha, how is it made? So it starts with something called the SCOBY, not Scooby, SCOBY, SCOBY. Here, fun fact. Did you know Scooby-Doo's official name was Scoobert Doo? Okay, maybe that's not a fun fact. Another fun fact, the guy who did the voice of Scooby-Doo, a guy named Don Messick, and he also did the voice of Papa Smurf, if you can kind of connect those together. See, you're guaranteed to learn stuff on this show, regardless of if it's useful or not. But SCOBY, SCOBY, is like a white, rubbery kind of pancake, and that's the actual kombucha bacteria. So SCOBY actually stands for S, symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, SCOBY, symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So that's where all the good stuff is. So what they're doing on the show notes today, I'll put a few pictures of the fermentation brewing process and the SCOBY. So if you go to regainedwellness.com/087, you can see what all this stuff looks like. So the SCOBY is placed in sweetened black or green tea and basically turns this sweet tea, people in the South, they like their sweet tea, turns the sweet tea into a liquid full of vitamins, minerals, living enzymes, and organic acids. So the sugar is key in this process because so it's not a sugar beverage, but it has the sugar to create the fermentation process. If you're familiar with, how alcohol is made in wine and beer and whatnot. So basically, the kombucha digests the sugar, and then it produces the probiotic microorganisms. So it also produces a bunch of other interesting things. So including glucarnic acid, which is a really strong detoxifier, then gluconic acid, which is very essential for digestion. It naturally produces lactic acid, so that's key in digestion. It helps in pH balance, blood circulation. It produces acetic acid, which really inhibits harmful bacteria. Then what else does it produce here? Butyric acid, which can help strengthen the gut wall, also can prevent candida. Then you've got things like a couple more acids like malic acid, which is a good liver detoxifier. Usnic acid, which is another natural antibiotic. It actually makes vitamin C. It makes a bunch of the B vitamins and then some amino acids and the other enzymes. So pretty amazing for this little rubbery pancake, what it does when it's in contact with the sugar. So like I said, the brewing process is very similar to making beer or wine, because it's, this combination of a few ingredients and you kind of let it do its thing. So it's something that can be made at home, without the risk of a keg explosion that comes from brewing cheap frat house beer or whatnot. There's a good website called thekitchen.com, and I'll link that up. And it has one of the best at-home kind of rundowns for brewing kombucha that I've seen. I'll give you a quick process in the meantime, though. So it's that website is The Kitchen, but it's kitchen.com. Again, I'll link that up on the show notes. So regainedwellness.com/087. So here's how you make it at home, or kind of just in general. So boil water, and then you add sugar till it dissolves. Then you drop in the tea, and then you let it steep for a few hours or until the water has cooled. Then you're going to take out the tea bags. You're going to strain out any loose tea. Here's just a side note on tea. Ideally, get loose leaf tea if you can, and use your own kind of, those metal strainers to do it. A lot of commercially made tea can be in tea bags that are really treated with a lot of like bleach and dyes, and that stuff can kind of leach into your tea with the hot water. So again, organic and as natural as possible, but if you can buy loose leaf tea, it's probably one of the better ways to consume it. Just side note. So, okay, you're taking out the tea bags, you strain out the loose tea, and you add in the starter tea. So what starter tea is it's what's left from the previous batches of kombucha. And you can buy it from stores and whatnot to get it started. So then you transfer to some jars, whatever, mason jars, whatever, something you can seal up, glass ideally. Then you add in that SCOBY. Then you cover the jars with like a cheesecloth, and then wrap it with rubber bands. So now you got to let it take its sweet time to do its ferment thing and let all that magic happen. So you're going to put it keep the jar out of direct sunlight, and you're looking at kind of a 7 to 10 day fermentation process. This is like a light natural fermentation process, which is why the alcohol content's actually quite low to almost nothing. But I'll talk about that in a sec. So then after around that, 7 to 10 days, you start to want to test it to see if you have that right balance of sweetness and tartness, and see how that's going. But that's kind of the rough breakdown. There's some other steps involved, but that's, kind of what you're looking at. Again, if that's something you're going to do, you want to follow a full guide to make sure all the steps are adhered to properly. So, like I mentioned, the alcohol issue. So is there alcohol in kombucha? So technically, yes, since it's a fermented beverage. So the yeasts do produce alcohol that's what they do when they eat up sugars. The simple process of alcohol is you have yeasts, they gobble up sugars, and then they kind of burp out carbon dioxide and alcohol. And that's kind of how they do their whole thing. The bacteria in the case of kombucha, the bacteria in the culture, though, turns the alcohol into the organic acids here. So there's a little alcohol is left behind after this process. This is what's different from traditional alcohol brewing, whether it's, spirits or wine or beer or whatever. The bacteria culture is using this alcohol into a better process, and that bacteria doesn't exist in beer, wine, whatnot. So that little alcohol that tends to be left behind is around maybe 1% by volume, and it's usually around 0.5%. So again, not enough to make you go streaking through your university or whatnot, but low enough that it's borderline, non-existent. I've heard some people say you have more alcohol left kind of in your system if you use you gargle mouthwash compared to what's into kombucha. So health benefits, that's what we're looking at here now. So there are some concerns about homebrewed kombucha not being properly produced, and that it can lead to sometimes upset stomachs, and at the worst case sometimes toxic reactions. So again, the homebrew is something you want to make sure you're following well. But now looking at all the commercially available versions of kombucha gives you a little more peace of mind and kind of can take a lot of the guesswork out of it. And as these things become more available and more mass produced, they tend to get a little cheaper and more cost effective. So the beauty with these things, with these commercially made products, is companies that are producing a very unique and kind of very health specific product are usually, they're very health conscious themselves. That's why they kind of got into that business. They want to take those things they love and they find beneficial and kind of bring it to a wider audience. So with a product like kombucha, you're going to find these companies using organic ingredients, and they're going to, avoid things like GMOs. They're wanting the best out of it. It's a product they would want to use themselves, so they kind of put absolutely the best stuff into it. So we'll move talking in the actual health benefits here. This is the primary reason for consuming it. I mean, kombucha is probably not something you want to just be chugging on a daily basis, because it's not going to be as cheap as other beverages, but it's, to me, worth the cost. So the health benefits around it center around its ability to help detoxify, help with joint care, aid in digestion, and gut health is probably one of the main things. It boosts the immune system quite a bit. So the issue with kombucha is that there really aren't a lot of clinical trials or deep scientific research into the claims. So this is not to say that there aren't health benefits from it, just that as a substance, it's not been deeply investigated. It's one of those things that, some of these products or substances we've had for thousands of years have a lot of these great health benefits associated to it, but they're just not necessarily studied on a modern level yet. So my take is there are a lot of studies on the compounds kombucha contains. So not necessarily the whole product itself, but those individual things we're talking about, like the acetic acid, is a real good source of polyphenols. It's a good antioxidant. It's got the ability to control blood glucose levels. So as its own compound, acetic acid is very well studied. And we obviously know the health benefits from things like vitamin C and the B vitamins, and kombucha contains both of those. So that's kind of my take. What the big attraction I'd say with kombucha is the healthy bacteria it contains, which can help improve your own gut bacteria, which leads to much better health. And we're really learning the insights onto how important a really healthy gut bacteria is to your overall health and wellness. And you can look at a lot of the works by Dr. Joseph Mercola. Dr. David Perlmutter has his book Brain Maker, talking all about gut health and the connection between brain health and mental health and everything like that. So with kombucha, there have been a few studies actually that identify and describe the microbiology of it, just from that standpoint. But like I say, its individual components have been investigated, just not as a whole. It hasn't been something that has been researched and studied, and that's probably something that will probably, as it's being more readily consumed and available, it's something you might see popping up more and more. So here's what's to take away from it. I love kombucha. I drink it all the time. There's some awesome companies right where I live that are producing some awesome stuff. In my hometown, there's a company called Booch, which makes all their stuff locally. It's amazing. There's one near Toronto, where I'm about an hour and a half from Toronto, and it's got what's their big one called Tonica Kombucha. So I mean, wherever you are, there's probably local versions of it, depending on where you live. You might have already known of it. You might have seen new varieties popping up, and you probably will see more varieties popping up as it becomes more popular. So to me, these companies have people's best interests in mind, and they want you to be healthy, and they tend to be smaller companies too. So good people to support. They're doing good things. They want people's best health in mind, and that's why they got into it, like producing it. So do I think it's a miracle elixir? Not really. I don't think it's ever good to slap that sort of label onto any singular thing. I think you want to look at your diet and your health involving many different components that all work together for your optimal health. You can't chalk it up just to one thing. So do I think it can have a place in your diet? Absolutely. Is it better than fruit juice, soda, sports drink? Absolutely. And again, should you rely on it to make up for all your other bad nutrition? Absolutely not. Again, when you center your diet around real things and real whole foods, vegetables, fruits, grass-fed proteins, nuts and seeds, good fats like olive oil, coconut oil, avocados, you're creating that better base of health. And then I think things at that point, then things like kombucha can be introduced in as well to kind of just take it to the next level and bump it up. So that's it for me. Let's end it right there. So if you have any more questions on kombucha or health related stuff, feel free to email me at info@regainedwellness.com and talk about stuff like that. If you haven't already, make sure to sign up for the email newsletter. And when you do sign up, so first, I'd keep you up to date with everything going on and share information that I don't necessarily share everywhere else, is kind of just by email. And when you do sign up, I send off a free ebook, and it's kind of a healthy eating starter kit, and it gets you up to speed, with things you want to be avoiding, like why you want to be avoiding them. Talks about foods you want to be including and why you want to have those in your diet. It's got some recipes, pretty sweet, gets you up and running. And you can get that by going to regainedwellness.com/guide, and you'll get all hooked up. Okay, so that's it for me with, all things diet, wellness, health, everything like that. I talk about, making the best choices possible, trying to get your health down as a good kind of base, getting everything in place and kind of bringing in all these different components to improve it. But just to keep in mind, it's not always going to go perfectly, but to focus on that idea of progress and not perfection in your diet and your health. Okay, see you next time.